Doing. So I'd just like to say before I start what an honor it is to take the stage just after Venkat. I think that was amazing. He's doing like 12 talks this conference. The guy is a machine. It's unbelievable. Let's have another round of applause for that guy. So my name's Stuart Reimel. I'm the head of future design at IG, a financial services company who brings the excitement and opportunity of trading the real-time financial markets to a retail audience. So IG has offices all over the world, and we have 3 developer centers. First one here in Bangalore, in Krakow in Poland, and in London. Now IG are the world's #1 provider of CFDs and spread betting. So we're giving a retail audience access to over 15,000 financial markets, which they can trade on our award-winning trading platforms and mobile applications. IG has a number of presenters here this week. So for those of you who were here yesterday, you will have heard from my colleagues James English and Matthias Herrich on their work on web and mobile. And later on in the week, you'll hear from my colleagues Kamal on big data and IG's enterprise data lake, from Shabam on serverless, and from IG's very own Kafka committer, Michael Pierce, on event-oriented architecture. And as for me, I joined IG over 10 years ago now as a JavaScript developer, so I know all about miracles, Venkat. And I joined IG because of the amazing things, the amazing innovative things that we're doing in the browser at the time. So for example, we were pushing real-time prices down to the browser with a latency of a couple of tens of milliseconds, back when Internet Explorer 6 was king, and when WebSockets were a mere twinkle in the eye of W3C. And at the time, I thought this was entirely miraculous. And this is what my talk today is going to be about. It's going to be less about technology and more about miracles. So it was the great science fiction writer and futurist Arthur C. Clarke who claimed in his 3rd law that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And it's true to say that much of the technology that's being discussed right here is indistinguishable from magic. Indeed, much of the technology that's in your pockets or on your wrists would have been difficult to imagine 10 years ago, let alone 20. So what I'm really trying to say here, ladies and gentlemen, is that you are the modern-day magicians. You are the modern-day miracle makers, the ones that make the dreams come true. And modern business is the business of creating miracle machines, and those that do it the best tend to rise to the top. So what does it take to build a miracle machine? What are the ingredients? What's the recipe? So many of the ingredients have been talked about right here in this conference. But is technology enough? Is technology sufficient? Well, unfortunately for us, I'm going to say it's not. So it was the great business management guru, Dr. Eli Goldratt, writer of The Goal and several other well-read business novels, who told us towards the turn of the century that technology is necessary but not sufficient. It's necessary but not sufficient. Rather like the acorn and its relationship with the oak tree, the acorn is absolutely necessary for an oak tree but is not sufficient. You need something else. You need more. And if you don't believe me, take an acorn, stick it next to your laptop on your desk, and wait for it to grow. Of course it won't. You need more. The oak tree needs more. It needs soil, it needs water, it needs sunlight, it needs nutrition. So while the acorn is an essential aspect in the system of life, it is necessary but not sufficient. So Goldratt went on and he said that technology can bring benefits if and only if it diminishes a limitation. And this is kind of stating the obvious, isn't it? We tend not to introduce technology unless we have a problem that we're trying to solve. However, if your organization has a limitation, there are frequently rules that our organization has put in place to try and accommodate for that limitation. And for that technology to be successful, not only does the technology have to change, but those rules have to change as well. Now, this might be a little bit opaque, so I'll try a few examples to see if that brings it home. So let's look at data analytics. So imagine you're in an organization that has a really, really poor data analytics story. So your limitation in that circumstance is that you don't have access to sufficient data to allow you to make educated business decisions. So in that circumstance, what tends to happen is that decisions get made by gut feel, or that maybe by the highest paid person in the room. So what do? You introduce data analytics. All good, right? Except that you find that it's necessary but not sufficient. You find that in order to get the best out of it, you also need to change the way that decisions are made in your organization. And changing decisions, the way that decisions are made, is a bit like changing culture. And I, for one, tend to believe that culture is read-only. So you need to change the way that you test and release your software. You need to change the way, the regularity with which you get feedback, so you can look at the data and make changes that are necessary. Let's try another example. So continuous delivery. Imagine that your organization is currently limited to a monthly release schedule. So your limitation at that time is the frequency with which you can release. And that in turn limits the frequency with which you can gain feedback, so that you can understand whether your software is actually meeting a need. So what do? You introduce continuous delivery. Job done, right? However, there are probably rules that exist in your organization about the way that you test software, about the way that you propagate release candidates through different environments, about how you get permission to release. So, although the technology is necessary and it's awesome, it's not sufficient. The rules have to change too. Let's try one more example. Microservices. So let's imagine you're in an organization, I'm sure none of you are like this, but you're in an organization that has a massive monolithic architecture. Now, your limitation there may well be tight coupling between components, making it really difficult to change one component without being really worried about horrible side effects appearing elsewhere. So what do? You take a leaf out of IG's book and you introduce an event-oriented architecture with microservices. Job done, right? Well, not unless you also restructure your teams so that they can work on different aspects of your architecture independently, unless you want Conway's law to reap its horrible harvest. So, for this mythical miracle machine, technology isn't enough. It's working within a system. And that system isn't silicon, it isn't binary, it isn't software, and it isn't hardware. It's wetware, ladies and gentlemen. It's brains. Juicy, juicy brains, marinating in sloppy bags of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen called human beings, people, or as project managers like to call us, resources. And I don't just mean the people who you work with, I mean the people who you work for. And I don't mean management, I don't mean the people who pay your wages. I mean the people, your customers, your clients, the people whose needs you are attending to through software. Now, these fickle biological specimens are a serious source of complexity in our system. They're a soup of needs and emotions which, when combined with others of their type, communicate through a low-fidelity, highly lossy communication protocol called language. And joking aside, through the sociology of organizations, through team dynamics, through individual relationships and the psychology of the individuals themselves, the software development system is almost entirely human. Now, we often talk about soft skills and hard skills as if they're somewhat separate. In fact, we often have different job roles to deal with these different aspects. But I'd like to appeal to you today that when you learn about all this awesome technology, that you think about what limitations these technologies are diminishing and what rules already exist in your organization that also have to change to see this technology bear fruit. So think about the human side of the equation. So you need to consider the system as a whole. You need to consider the parts, but also the interactions between the parts. So it was the great systems thinker Russell Ackoff, who is incidentally the last of the significant dearly departed that I'm going to picture today, who put it best when he said that the output of a system is not the sum of the behaviors of its parts, it's the product of their interactions. And this is so true. You'll often hear people say that our people are our greatest assets or our technology is our greatest assets. And although this is worthy, it's also complete nonsense because it's the interactions between our people that are our greatest assets, and it's the interactions between our people and our technology, which is our greatest assets. So this is all very nice, but you came here early in the morning to hear about how you make a miracle machine. So let's be more specific. So what are the ingredients? Of course, you need technology, but we've already learned that technology is necessary but not sufficient. So let's not dwell here. Let's move on. So you also need empathy. That means the ability to feel what other people are feeling, specifically to feel what your customers are feeling and what they need. And whether you achieve this through design thinking or service design or simply by giving your miracle makers, that's you folks, access to talk to the customers, you absolutely need empathy. In addition, you need trust. And this is not the kind of trust where I ask you to do something and I trust that you'll do it. It's the kind of trust that allows you to speak and act freely without fear. Now, Google, in their famous Project Aristotle, called this psychological safety, and they identified it as the most important factor in forming effective teams. And it's not soft, it's not fluffy. It's not soft, it's not fluffy. It's about creating a culture of candor where people can hold each other to account without fear. And it is a complete cornerstone of what you need to create an effective organization and effective teams. You also need inquiry, which is enabled through trust. The ability to ask questions, maybe to ask difficult questions. The ability to continue look at where you are at the moment and try and understand whether you're on the right path. Now, effective inquiry not only requires effective architecture to enable quick change, but it also requires the mental habits and the associated practices within an organization to continually ask questions. And lastly, you need awareness, or should I say enterprise awareness. Awareness of how you're performing, awareness of how your team is performing, awareness of how your software is performing, but most importantly, a strong awareness of how the work that you're doing in your team is contributing to the whole, how it's contributing to the entire value stream. So, for the miracle machine is not only technology. As we found out, technology is necessary but not sufficient. It's a human system that depends on empathy, trust, inquiry, and awareness. And perhaps the punchline to this talk is that the miracle machine is not really a machine at all. The idea of business as a machine has been handed down to us through the generations since the Industrial Revolution and Frederick Winslow Taylor's work on scientific management in the late 1800s. And the idea that business can be a perfect machine that has the perfect business logic, business processes, that only hires the perfect resources and optimizes things perfectly for the optimal outcomes really doesn't apply anymore. Because modern business is really about the business of change. It's about the business of surprise, of handling surprise. And for that, organizations need to create practices, both technological and organizational, to allow people to act with freedom and autonomy. within a landscape of change. Now, this is a subtle point, but it's something that requires profound change. So, to sum up, the miracle machine isn't a machine at all. It's a social system. It's a complex, adaptive system, which, if treated with the right care, will allow miracles to emerge. So, given the right technology, with empathy, trust, inquiry, and awareness, you have all the necessary ingredients to make miracles happen. It's constantly evolving, human and machine together. So that's what I'm trying to do at IG, and I hope some of you are on the same journey too. Thank you very much.